The rain did not stop. For 3 straight days, it turned the forest into a grave before the Romans even understood they were trapped. By the dawn of the 3rd morning, the mighty Roman legions were no longer an army. They had become scattered fragments of terrified men stumbling through mud, screaming for orders that could no longer be heard. The ravine echoed with panic. Officers shouted into chaos while Germanic warriors closed in from every direction with cold precision. The trap was tightening. One by one, nearly 20,000 soldiers from the most feared military force on Earth were being erased inside the forests of Germania. At the center of the collapse stood Publius Quintilius Varus. He watched Roman cavalry abandon the battlefield and disappear into the storm. In that moment, he understood the truth. The formation was shattered. The eagle standards were surrounded. The escape route was gone. Ahead stood a massive barrier of timber and packed earth, secretly built by the enemy days before the ambush even began. Behind him was only death. Varus knew what happened to captured Roman generals. He slowly drew his sword, lifted his eyes toward the gray sky, and chose death over humiliation. With that single act, the fate of the 17th, 18th, and 19th legions was sealed forever. But the destruction of those legions had begun long before the killing started. It began with a lie. Rome believed Germania had already been conquered. The empire believed the tribes were broken, the taxes were secured, and the Rhine River no longer needed to protect them from the wilderness beyond. They were wrong. West of the Rhine stood Roman Gaul, organized cities, paved roads, and imperial order. East of it stretched Germania, endless forests, swamps, rain, and tribes that refused to kneel. For 20 years, Rome fought to dominate that land and finally believed victory was complete. Publius Quintilius Varus was not sent there as a conqueror. He was sent as an administrator. A governor meant to organize territory Rome already considered pacified. He marched deep into Germania with 3 legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, to collect tribute and settle disputes among the tribes. These soldiers were masters of open warfare. In open ground, Roman infantry could form disciplined battle lines and crush almost any enemy through coordination and engineering. But the forest was not open ground. Serving beside Varus was a man he trusted completely. Arminius. Born into the Cherusci tribe, Arminius had spent years in Rome as a political hostage to guarantee his father's loyalty. During that time, he learned Roman tactics, Roman language, and Roman warfare. Rome believed they had transformed him into one of their own. Varus saw Arminius as proof that the empire could civilize the north. He never realized he was standing beside the man preparing to destroy him. In September of 9 AD, Arminius arrived with alarming news. He claimed northern tribes had rebelled against Roman authority. If true, the uprising had to be crushed immediately. Arminius suggested a shortcut through the Teutoburg Forest. He promised it would allow the legions to suppress the revolt and still return safely before winter arrived. Varus accepted the advice. The order was given. Nearly 20,000 Roman soldiers turned away from the safety of the main road and marched directly into the wilderness. Soon after, Arminius requested permission to leave the column. He claimed he would gather allied Germanic forces to support Rome. Varus agreed without hesitation. Arminius disappeared into the forest. But he was not gathering allies for Rome. He was gathering executioners. The Cherusci, Marsi, and Bructeri tribes united under his command, temporarily abandoning generations of rivalry for one purpose: to wipe Rome from Germania forever. At first, the enemy was not the tribes, it was the land itself. A violent storm rolled across the region. Temperatures dropped. Roads dissolved into thick mud that swallowed boots and wagon wheels alike. Then the disappearances began. Men at the rear of the column vanished silently into the trees. Supply handlers disappeared. Scouts never returned. There were no battle cries yet, only absence. Then came the storm winds. Massive oak branches snapped overhead and crashed onto the marching Romans. The legionaries saw it as terrible luck. The Germans saw it as nature fighting beside them. By the end of the first day, the Romans entered a narrow ravine. That was when the hills exploded. Thousands of Germanic warriors hidden within the forest unleashed volleys of spears and javelins from every side. The legionaries attempted to form defensive positions, but the terrain destroyed their discipline. The trees were too dense. The slopes were uneven. Mud dragged at their armor. The Germans attacked in waves. They rushed from the forest, struck quickly, and vanished before Roman infantry could respond. Varus finally understood the scale of the disaster. That night, the survivors built a desperate defensive camp from earth and timber. They burned supply wagons and abandoned anything that slowed movement. Inside the camp, exhausted soldiers listened to the sounds beyond the darkness. The Germans celebrated through the night. They shouted chants to their gods. They tortured prisoners where Roman soldiers could hear the screams. Nobody slept. Every man understood what would happen if the line finally collapsed. At dawn, the Romans abandoned most of their remaining supplies and pushed northward, hoping to reach open terrain. But the forest never released them. For 2 more days, the army was slowly destroyed by enemies they could barely see. Then came the final trap. The surviving Romans marched into a narrow passage between a steep hill and a massive swamp. The Calcareous Narrows. Arminius had prepared the battlefield perfectly. Along the hillside stood a hidden defensive wall built from compacted earth and timber, stretching beside the Roman route for hundreds of meters. As the Romans entered the choke point, Germanic warriors climbed atop the rampart and unleashed spears, stones, and arrows into the trapped column below. The legions had nowhere to go. The wall blocked one side, the swamp blocked the other. Roman discipline finally shattered. Desperate cavalry attempted to charge the wall, but panic spread among the horses in the confined space. Riders crashed into their own infantry while German warriors opened gaps in the barricade, swarmed the cavalry, then disappeared behind the wall again. The Romans were not simply outnumbered, they were defeated by terrain itself. Heavy armor dragged men into the mud. Wet bowstrings failed in the rain. Tight formations became impossible. The battlefield turned into a prison. By the 3rd afternoon, Varus looked upon the destruction of his command and understood there was no escape left. After his death, the Roman command structure collapsed completely. Some soldiers killed themselves beside their general. Others surrendered and begged for mercy that never came. The remaining survivors fought in isolated groups until they were overwhelmed one after another inside the forest. The killing continued until darkness covered the battlefield. Rain washed the mud from Roman armor, exposing the silver and gold decorations of the emperor's own legions before the bodies slowly sank into the swamp beneath them. The result of the Battle of Teutoburg Forest was absolute. 3 entire Roman legions vanished. Nearly 20,000 men were lost. The numbers 17, 18, and 19 were never used again by the Roman army. They were erased in disgrace. After the battle, Arminius sent the severed head of Varus to a neighboring Germanic king, hoping to secure an alliance against Rome. But the king feared Roman revenge and instead forwarded the head to Emperor Augustus. The emperor ordered it buried with honor. Ancient historians later wrote that Augustus was haunted by the defeat for the rest of his life. He would reportedly wander his palace crying, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." Rome abandoned its dream of conquering Germania. The empire retreated permanently to the Rhine River, building forts, walls, and defensive borders instead of expanding deeper into the north. That river became one of the great dividing lines of European history for centuries. Because of 3 days inside a rain-soaked forest, Roman expansion stopped. Latin culture stopped, and the Roman Empire transformed from a force of endless conquest into a civilization defined by borders it could no longer cross. One man's misplaced trust changed the course of history. And the Battle of Teutoburg Forest proved that even the greatest empire on earth can still be swallowed by the ground beneath its feet.